Get Rich Education is brought to you by Valhalla Wealth and Ridge Lending Group.
You're listening to the show that has created more passive income for people than nearly any show in the world. This is the powerful Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, Get Rich Education, episode 167. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold, and today we're talking about building your wealth through the infinite banking concept with our guest, MC Laubscher. But first, yes, Luke Skywalker is back on the big screen, and that's pretty cool, but the bigger news is that it's the holiday season, and you know what? During this season of giving that we're in, I want to tell you that you are already doing more giving to others than you even knew that you were. Just consider the investor properties that you've bought this year. Just look back for a moment. Yeah, when you go out and do that, okay, you've got the intent of a profiteer, but at the same time, you're being more altruistic than you think. You've bought property that's been renovated by a provider in that local market. Well, now you're the one effectively providing clean, safe, affordable, and functional housing to a tenant. You, as the investor, are really one of the last key pieces in taking that property from what I like to call curb appalling to curb appealing. Besides just providing the tenant family with a place to live, think about how you've provided support for all of those rehabbers and all of those subcontractors along the way. You are supporting plumbing companies and electricians and carpenters, and you're also supporting manufacturing companies, the suppliers of materials from concrete to steel making to lumber companies to companies that make roofing materials. And as an investor, you're also supporting jobs and incomes for your chosen housing inspector company and all of the title company staff and your mortgage loan officer staff, and then ongoing support over the years for your property management company while they're helping you secure your income stream for you over time. So not only are you helping your personal economy, but you support an incredible amount of supply chain and labor infrastructure that you might not even think about. In this season of giving, you might already be more giving than you think. A larger picture way that you're giving that you might not be thinking about is that when you provide sound rental housing for others, you are enabling a society to actually be more mobile. Rental housing caters to mobility, especially when we're thinking about the United States. Okay, one reason the United States is prosperous is because we're a highly mobile society. And more mobility, that makes for a more productive economy because you see, now labor can be matched up with opportunity. Now talent can be matched up with opportunity. Well, when talent is mobile and it can be paired up in the same geography as where that opportunity exists, well, now that's where productivity occurs. To give you an example of what I mean, in so many of the world's less prosperous countries, people live in the same home for decade after decade, or really even generations. It just doesn't typically work that way in the United States. We are more mobile. My wife is Filipina. When my wife and I travel to the Philippines and we visit the home where she grew up, we travel out to Tarlac province and kind of find our way back this dirt road, sort of an alleyway really, to her family home. And boy, it's a really simple place. When you're inside the home, you're kind of looking at exposed concrete masonry for walls, and there's no air conditioning. And most of the family just kind of then takes up employment with whatever local tasks that there are to do there. It's kind of nice in a way. I've got to admit, it is kind of quaint and nice to sort of reminisce that that's the same tract of land in that neighborhood that her family has owned for generations. There's a giant tamarind tree there in the yard, and we picked the fruit from it. And it's the same yard, and it was planted there in that spot by her great-grandfather or whatever generations earlier. So Well, we don't so much live like that in the United States. Much of the world doesn't live in a society as progressive and as mobile as we do in the United States. So as an investor in income property, you help enable mobility, which creates the very society that you prosper from. And I guess it sounds a little cheesy to say it, but you really are healing America one home at a time and one neighborhood at a time when you're helping support these rehabilitated properties. And, sometimes it's pretty interesting to look at the Google Street View image of what your newly bought turnkey property looked like 3 years ago, and it makes it easier to realize that vital role that you take in the good that you're doing. So as a real estate investor, you really are making a substantial difference in the lives of families, neighborhoods, societies, and the economy. So this holiday season, be grateful that you are already more of a giver than you think that you are. Well, you've probably heard of the infinite banking concept. It is quite a popular wealth creation vehicle among real estate investors, but it's got a lot of moving parts. So to fully understand it, you need to watch a longer presentation. So today we're just going to cover some of the highlights for you as to why it is such a widely embraced concept and something that you might want to consider. And just like you probably do, I like concrete examples to help facilitate understanding. So I will at least ask our guest, whom is an absolute expert on infinite banking, I'll ask him how exactly your dollar would be treated if you stored it inside this concept to help you get your mind around it. That's right after this. You're listening to Get Rich Education. Cashflow real estate investors, if you're looking for a mortgage loan with a company that specializes in investment property loans, it's Ridge Lending Group. They provide income property loans in almost every U.S. state. Ridge has worked with tens of thousands of investors and homeowners all over the country. In fact, with ethics and transparency, they've helped more people realize their dreams through real estate investing than any other mortgage lender in the country. Get started at ridgelendinggroup.com. MC Laubscher is the host of the top-rated business and investing podcast, Cashflow Ninja, and also the president and chief wealth strategist of Valhalla Wealth. They help busy people build wealth outside of Wall Street by strategically combining their clients' cash flow statements with the financial vehicle of the wealthy, according to the infinite banking concept. If you are interested to learn how to perpetually multiply your wealth, you can access an exclusive webinar at yourownbankingsystem.com.
This is the Millionaire Minds T. Harbeck. You're listening to the powerful Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold. Don't quit your daydream.
Today's guest is a wealth architect and strategist educator, and he's a financial freedom fighter. He's the president and CEO of Valhalla Wealth Financial and hosts the popular podcast Cashflow Ninja. He helps people eliminate the control of banks and financial institutions and challenge existing societal belief systems and just all this misinformation around money, saving, investing, wealth, and retirement. Welcome to Get Rich Education, MC Laubscher.
Thank you so much for having me on, Keith. Excited to be on your show and honored to be here.
Share a bit of your background with us first.
Keith, I'm originally from South Africa, so I came to the United States in 2001 with a backpack, one suitcase, a sense of humor and a sense of adventure. And I grew up in a pretty historic time period in South Africa's history. In 1991, President Nelson Mandela was released from prison. In 1994, he became the first democratically elected president in that country. So it really impacted the way that I view the world and my approaches to everything that I do. And then when I got to the United States, I started playing rugby, actually in a city-based National Rugby League. And on traveling for sports, I came across this little purple book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And that's kind of where that journey started for me. I learned everything I could about investing, real estate, creating wealth and building wealth. And during that time, I kind of fell into a mentor. And I say I fell into because I'm honest to admit that I didn't know that was what you were supposed to do at that stage, right? And I learned everything in the real estate industry. They were investing in a lot of very large multi-family unit apartment buildings in the city of Chicago. So learn the real estate business from the ground up with them. starting basically performing maintenance for them to eventually doing property management, held a real estate brokerage license, which I looked at acquisitions, what they buy, what they sell, how they buy, which properties they held onto, which ones they let go and sold. So really, really learned a lot about not only real estate investing, but wealth building. And that took me in several different directions. But currently, as you mentioned, I am the president and CEO of Valhalla Wealth. We help busy people like entrepreneurs and investors grow their wealth outside of Wall Street. We combine asset classes in a really holistic approach to give our clients control over predictable systems and processes to help them collapse time in their wealth plan and achieve results that take most people 30 to 40 years. And then I'm also the creator and host of the Cashflow Ninja podcast, where I interview cashflow ninjas on how to create income streams from real estate, businesses, commodities, paper assets, and also digital assets like crypto and distributed ledger technologies, also known as blockchain. So guests that I've had on there has been Robert Kiyosaki, Kevin Harrington, Jim Rogers, and also Bitcoin billionaire Roger Ver.
Yeah, well, that's great. And you mentioned Robert Kiyosaki in the influence of that little purple book that you read after you had moved to the United States, Rich Dad Poor Dad. And it's amazing, MC. Sometimes I don't think we can even go 1 month on this show without some mention of that book, but I absolutely love it because it's been so influential. Today with Valhalla Wealth, you meet with so many prospective clients and people and families and even a lot of professionals that are very good at what they do, and they might be highly educated in their own discipline, whether that's engineering or whatever it happens to be. What are some of the main reasons really that you see people struggle financially, even people with a high degree of formal educational attainment? A lot of them struggle financially because not only did they not have any real class on money from kindergarten to 12th grade, you might have a business class, but you don't really have it on how you personally handle money, personal finance. You also don't get that personal finance course in college. And then when you get out in the working world, your employer sure isn't going to tell you about it either. So many people struggle financially. What are some of the commonalities that you see among all the people that you deal with at Valhalla Wealth?
You really hit the nail on the head there with our education system, because it truly doesn't prepare people for the new economy and the information age and doesn't really teach us anything about money. It's truly a Prussian school, a system model that worked in the industrial age, since it produces workers and employees and also obedient and patriotic soldiers. And we're just no longer in a jobs economy. Also, we have a skills economy, and we compete in a constantly rapidly changing environment. So they don't teach anything about the most important things in life, right? Health, relationships, and money in school to prepare. And then some of the other things too, as you mentioned, there's a lot of very educated folks that struggle financially because not only are they not taught anything about money, but the current financial planning model is unproven and is really designed to enrich Wall Street. It's based on the accumulation model, not cash flow. It's also based on a model which outsources the wealth management in your life to someone else. So you're really taking a lot of your control away from your own life by doing that. And I've touched on the rapidly changing environment. I think that is also one thing that I see why they struggle, is because they're not cognizant of this rapidly changing environment around us. And we just have to take a look here in the United States where we're at. We're extremely indebted as a nation. States are broke, municipalities are broke. There is a ton of other problems with Social Security, Medicare, and so forth. And then there's other issues such as huge trends, the baby boomer trend going into their retirement years. So a lot of different factors and a lot of things play into that. But I think the rapidly changing environment really, really plays into why a lot of people struggle, combined with the lack of financial education.
I like the way that you said something. A lot of people outsource their financial control to somebody else rather than seizing it themselves. And a lot of people just don't realize that they can seize it themselves. And a lot of people, well-educated professionals, again, just don't know what they don't know. 5 years ago, I was still an employee in the working world, and I had a lot of my employees that knew I had a great interest and I was receiving this passive income from real estate investing. So one of the people I invited, my coworker in that workaday job, to a real estate investor meeting that evening. He had his master's degree in engineering, and he had his PE, his professional engineering engineering license, very well-educated guy, very sharp guy. And his main takeaway from that investor meeting is, oh, I never really thought about the fact that real estate could pay you income every month. I just thought about the fact that it either goes up or goes down in value.
If only a small group of people have figured it out and are building wealth in any economy, why are we following the advice that the majority of people are following that are struggling financially? So we've mentioned Robert Kiyosaki. He always talks about be careful of your teachers and your mentors. And, you know, there's still this paradigm of the millionaire next door. But we know that the millionaire next door really doesn't exist anymore. It's cash flow millionaires that are thriving in this new economy. But I think from a philosophical approach to creating and building wealth is there's a couple of things that we teach. And the first thing is that you're the greatest and biggest asset that you will ever have in your life. You're the creator of all assets and income streams in your life. So to be able to increase this asset and the value of this asset, to be able to create value for others is just super, super key in this new economy. We're all unique. We have different backgrounds. We have different stories. We all have something that we're great at, you know, a so-called stupid human trick, right?
Right.
Something that just comes naturally to us. So I think that's one thing that we completely lose sight of when we plan for wealth. So the other thing that we look at is when it comes to wealth, we have to understand and be very clear what it is that we want. Because if we don't know what we want, it's very difficult to create a plan that's going to get you there. So be very, very clear on your vision. Be very, very specific and clear on exactly what you want. It might be a number, a cash flow number. And then the second thing that ties into that is why. Why does that matter? Why does it matter that you want that? And then the third question you have to ask yourself is, who do I need to become, tying back into your greatest asset, to be able to achieve this? Because you have to put that at the forefront of your wealth plan, which is you. You can't escape it, right? My philosophy is not to hand over money to someone else and outsource wealth management, as we touched upon. So once we've established kind of that, then you can bring in people to help you, a team of A players and all-stars and all the areas that you need, like tax strategists and so forth, that this is kind of their specialty and their special high-income skill set. Possibly their stupid human trick, as I mentioned, right? And they can help you build processes and systems to help you implement and execute this plan to get you to exactly where you want to go. So I just want to say again, remember, you're at the forefront of this. You're still the leader. You're in control, and you're always in control of these systems and processes.
Your best investment is you, and you are entirely up to you. So, yeah, philosophically, I mean, that's one thing, but what are some actionable strategies and tactics that you utilize within wealth planning as a wealth architect?
Yeah, some of the actionable stuff, where to start, right, is the first thing is we have to look at kind of the wealth formula. One wealth formula that a mentor shared with me is basically the equation for financial capital is to combine our mental capital with our relationship capital. And that brings the financial capital into our life. And the goal is then to convert that financial capital into cash flow. And that's kind of where we kind of reverse engineer this process. So you start with that cash flow goal in mind. And let's just say, you know, it's a lot of people talk about a freedom number. And let's just say it's $10,000 a month, which is about $120,000 a year. Then we can kind of look at what is our strengths, what are the things that we're passionate about, what is aligned with our high income skill sets, and where can we get a certain return, right? So let's just hypothetically say we can get a 12% cash on cash return on a certain investment. We could work it backwards then and say, well, you're probably going to have to need around about $1 million at work to get that $120,000 of cash flow per year, looking at that return. So if you look at the vehicle and let's just say you choose real estate and, you know, let's just say we use turnkey real estate, then we could say, you know, hypothetically, let's just say we could buy 10 properties for $100,000 each. Well, now we've achieved that goal if they're paid off. But there's another variable we have to consider, and that's time. So how do we reduce and collapse that time in our plan to accomplish that results and the outcome what we wanted? So again, that's still the accumulation approach was how long would it take me to accumulate that $1 million, right? Which traditional conventional planning is based on to eventually pay off that 10 homes, have that cash flow coming in. And when we look at the cash flow model, the questions that we should ask ourselves is, how do we accelerate this? What are some of the wealth accelerators? How do I develop cash flow, put it at work, create more cash flow, invest it? And some of the strategies we talk about is wealth capture, because money flows through our personal economy every day, every minute, right? How can we capture that? Commercial banks do in this pool of money they have. The second wealth accelerator is leverage. How do we leverage the money that we've captured? And the third one that I like to talk about is dollar maximization. How do we position every dollar in our personal economy to do more than one job simultaneously? And that brings into the fourth lever, which is compound and multiply. How do we position ourselves and our assets that we have right now, along with our skill sets, and be able to position it for maximum efficiency and have all of these wealth accelerators and levers work for us? So a lot of the plans that we structure have systems for liquidity, income, and growth. I just touched on the systems and processes that your team of A players help you build. So some of the things that we teach as part of our liquidity, we use high cash value life insurance, specifically structured whole life insurance vehicle according to the infinite banking concept with mutual insurance companies. Then we leverage the cash values to use in our income system, where we invest in asset classes such as real estate in that. And then we also have, after these two systems have been established, a liquidity system, a income system. We can establish a growth system where we look at how to really growth and multiply it. And there's different vehicles that we use for that as well. But I think that the big takeaway here is to really, really start at a point and really start breaking it down, because if you can break down the steps and put that plan together, you're going to have a much clearer picture of exactly it is where you want to go.
Yeah, well, you brought up a few of my favorite words there, MC. One of them is leverage. You know, as investors out there, and we're being growth oriented, we often think about, okay, now how can I get enough liquidity stored up so that I can go ahead and buy my next, you mentioned turnkey property. We'll just say turnkey property. But, you know, another question that people need to ask themselves that they don't often think of, rather than just accumulating that next liquidity ball, is what can I currently do with the resources that I have now to go ahead and leverage those? For example, one thing is I talk about equity that you currently have in your properties, and it's illiquid and it's unsafe and its rate of return is already zero. So you might think of doing an equity transfer. And you mentioned something else that you can go ahead and name as a resource that someone can use that they might already have, and they're just not utilizing their existing liquidity, and they're just not harnessing the power of it enough. And that's the infinite banking concept strategy that you utilize for investing in business and assets as something that can produce income streams. So just share a bit more with us about that, this structured whole life insurance policy that you touched on.
Yeah, Keith, it's a very specifically designed insurance vehicle with whole life insurance. This is not your average whole life insurance out there. It's also called high cash value life insurance. Cash flow banking is a word that's out there too. Family banking. And basically what it is, it's a specifically structured insurance vehicle that maximizes the cash value, again, to that liquidity part and system of your plan. And if it's done and it's structured correctly, it's going to give you control and cash flow in it. A liquidity, as we mentioned, there's guarantees on principals and growth. There's dividends with these mutual insurance carriers. And the growth inside there is tax-free. You know, the biggest wealth destroyer that's out there is taxes. And our philosophy is, please pay all your taxes, right? We don't want to take pictures in orange jumpsuits of you, but pay your taxes on the seed, not the harvest. And you don't have to leave Uncle Sam a tip. Yeah. And then it is a private asset, provides asset protection in many states that is out there. There's a lot of flexibility with this. But I think the most important part of this strategy is that, as I mentioned, it captures your wealth just as like you can do with real estate, and it allows you to then leverage it. So this is a great vehicle to do that and utilize the strategy in, because you can access your cash value through a policy loan from the insurance company. So it's not that you draw down an account as you do with other qualified retirement plans. But dovetailing this as your liquidity with income, such as real estate, is extremely, extremely powerful because it truly is two asset classes that maximizes the positioning of your overall wealth to protect against wealth destroyers. It provides cash flow in both of these vehicles. There's equity appreciation in both of them. It allows you controlled leverage, and if done correctly, there's an inflation hedge. So I always chuckle, as I mentioned, I had a real estate brokerage license at one stage, and when I started learning both industries and both vehicles, I just started chuckling because you know, Keith, that the tax code is really a blueprint of how to build wealth.
Sure.
And some of the similarities that I saw in these, for instance, in real estate, there's a 1031 exchange, and insurance, there's a 1035 exchange, and so forth. It was very, very, very intriguing. So I think the big takeaway for your listeners with regards to the strategy is that you have to set up a liquidity. Money has to reside somewhere. I don't trust the banks. And a place that provides guarantees, tax-free growth, and then to be able to leverage that and utilize that in your income system that provides income streams.
Okay, so just breaking it down to the really simple here, let me give you an example. If one of us were to go ahead and accumulate liquidity in this structured whole life insurance policy through the infinite banking concept. And like you mentioned, MC, it does need to be set up correctly. It needs to be structured a certain way. So say me as an investor, if I want to go ahead and purchase my next turnkey property and I'm trying to accumulate $20,000 for a down payment, well, what I might currently do is go ahead and siphon off $1,000 from my paycheck every month into my Bank of America checking account or into my Wells Fargo savings account. So rather than putting that $1,000 per month there, instead, we're putting this into the cash value of a structured whole life insurance policy that's in our name, and it resides there. Rather than earning next to nothing in the banks, what kind of a rate of return could we expect in this example where I'm contributing $1,000 per month into this policy?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And the rate of return at certain stages is different because there is a loading phase, as we call it in there, because there are insurance costs initially. But some of the dividends of these mutual insurance companies that have been around for almost 200 years ranges around 6 to 7%. Now, I've touched upon dollar maximization as well. So this is one thing that this allows you to do as well. Instead of putting your money into Bank of America, where you become part of someone else's banking system, and the money really truly is just doing only one job for you at that stage, accumulating, directing it into a vehicle such as this, it's doing many, many more jobs simultaneously. So as I've mentioned, just as in real estate, there's cash flow. There's definitely a better return than what you can get in the bank. This is money that you can access at any time. It's tax-free growth, so there's no 1099s to worry about. Yeah, and there's guarantees on the growth and the dividends that you get as part of that. So that's why I like this vehicle as part of an overall strategy. And that's one thing that I would say to your listeners is we have to look at wealth and wealth strategies as part of systems and processes. So we tend to be very, very product focused and just look at different products individually. And the real power comes not just from the way that this is structured or the real estate, but the combination of both of them, which allows you to control two assets simultaneously. And then I mentioned reduce the time that it'll take that because of the control that you have in redirecting cash flows into your own money system.
Let's just talk some more about the real benefit here, just sort of sticking with this example. Say I put $1,000 per month in for quite a long period of time, and it's also getting the benefit of a 6 to 7% interest rate accumulation. Say I accumulate $60,000 there over a period of years. From what I've learned is you can't quite get access to all 100% of the cash value at any moment, but maybe up to 80, 90%. So say that way I could go ahead and pull $50,000 out of this structured whole life policy through the infinite banking concept. With that $50K, what I can do is I've kind of pulled that money out of my account so I can go ahead and buy some property with it or whatever. So now I have that $50,000 out there. probably leverage, probably cash flowing, probably getting a lot of the benefits that real estate investors have with that 50K. However, that 50K, and you sort of touched on it, we have the ability to make this work two places at the same time. Even though, in a sense, I've kind of taken the money out of my policy and I had that $50,000 working in real estate, I've really just borrowed against it, and I still have the $50,000 inside the policy earning 6 to 7% interest for me because I've more so borrowed against it than I have gone ahead and extracting it out of there. So therefore, say I get a 12% return from the real estate, which is pretty conservative, but I know you mentioned 12% before. Now, because I have this $50,000 working for me two places at the same time, I have it getting 12% return from real estate and a 6 to 7% return from the policy. So now I have an 18 to 19% return. And basically, I've just created arbitrage for myself, a tailwind in my investing life. I've created a 6 to 7% arbitrage above and beyond whatever I've invested that money in because I've just borrowed against that cash value in the policy.
Yeah, and the arbitrage, too, is that there is an interest rate that you would pay to access this money. So that's 5%. So what banks are doing, and I love what you touched on earlier about leveraging our own assets and then combining it with the assets of other people, which is exactly what you're doing here in your example. So the banking model, usually the same thing. They take deposits, they pay out almost nothing, but there's some value to having a bank account. And then they take the money and they borrow that out. The arbitrage that they're doing is what they're paying for that money that they're getting in and then leveraging out. So that side of the arbitrage too is something that I'm looking at. And personally, it's made me a better investor because I'm looking at 5%, which there's a cost to money regardless of where your money resides, right? Even if it's under your mattress. So I know that it's going to cost me 5%. So it makes me a very, very diligent and very disciplined investor to look at other vehicle classes and assets because I am looking at that arbitrage between the 5% and using this example, the 12% as well. And then my money, as you've mentioned, is on the other side of this quote unquote system, liquid, growing, tax-free. So it does do a lot of different things simultaneously as a solid foundation for this overall wealth plan that we have and part of my liquidity system.
So in the example that I gave, did I just happen to mention everything correctly except for the 5% interest that you're paying when you've borrowed against the cash value of your policy?
Yes, you've summarized it pretty well that you're borrowing at 5% to access that money. And the other thing that I would also say, this might be a first question that folks had, why would insurance companies do this? And insurance companies are very, very well run and very, very profitable. That's why Warren Buffett loves them and owns a lot of insurance companies. They are guaranteed to get the payback of that because there's a death benefit and there's also the cash value. So basically, they're protected two ways of that loan that they're extending to you for the investment, and then you get to leverage it at 5%.
Sure, we're talking about some of the most durable companies here, perhaps in America's history, these mutual insurance companies that have been around for a couple of hundred years. That's who you're dealing with for these infinite banking policies.
Absolutely. A lot of them have been around since the mid-1800s. They've weathered recessions, market crashes, depressions. Even during the last financial crisis, it is just quite intriguing to see how they performed. And a lot of them, they did not even bat an eyelid. They've gone on. They have millions and some of them billions of dollars in excess reserves on their books. And we're talking about mutual insurance companies here specifically. They're not listed on the stock exchanges. The shareholders of a mutual insurance company is the policyholders. So it truly takes you back to the foundational roots and value that with the establishment of insurance companies in communities initially.
Well, there sure are a lot of mechanics and details around the infinite banking concept. There's just no way that we could cover them all in one show. But are there just any sort of final takeaways that someone ought to know if they're thinking about accelerating their growth through the infinite banking concept?
Yeah, I would say that it has to, one of the big threats is it has to be set up correctly. So there are practitioners and really good groups out there, infinite banking practitioners, authorized infinite banking practitioners across the country. And there's different groups that can set these up. Make sure that you find the correct professional to help you set it up with the correct company, because those are two of the big things that will have the strategy not work for you. And then just some of the biggest takeaways that I would leave your listeners with, as well as remember, as you talked about, Keith, as well, you're still your greatest and biggest asset. The strategies that you bring in, you're in control of it, and the systems and processes that these professionals will set up for you, you're still the leader of this in your life and achieving financial freedom.
Yeah, and I think basically the younger that you are, the more it's going to help you, although this can help an investor at any age. What should a person do if they want to find out more about the infinite banking concept?
Keith, there's a presentation that they can access that I did for your listeners at yourownbankingsystem.com. It's yourownbankingsystem.com. I cover a lot there in a lot more detail, and I give a lot more of specific examples of how to utilize it. So that might be something that they want to look at. And there's also a course with a link on that page that they can access. And if they want to further educate themselves on the concept and having something like this as part of their system.
Yeah, I really recommend checking that out. It is a powerful concept, but it takes a little bit of time for you to wrap your head around that. So leverage is doing more with less, and leverage is also doing more with what you've already got. MC Laubscher, thanks so much for coming out of the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Keith.
So really, the big advantages to the infinite banking concept are that you have immediate liquidity, you have tax-free growth, and you have the ability to leverage and use the funds in combination with other asset classes. If you're untrusting of governments and banks and you want to control your own bank, well, this is how you can do that. It's a place to warehouse your wealth inside institutions that have a solid track record for almost 200 years, and they've survived market crashes, recessions, depressions, and the last financial crisis. We've seen a lot of recent examples of banks doing shady stuff, so if you're just fed up with them and you don't like them, this is also a way for you to stop giving them your business. Remember, like I discussed at the beginning of the show, this holiday season, as a real estate investor, be grateful because you are already even more giving than you possibly knew. Special thanks to today's guest, MC Laubscher. I'm Keith Weinhold, and I am here every week to help you build your wealth. Until next time, don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
Ranked by Forbes as one of the fastest growing cities, Orlando, Florida has a big and diverse economy, yet still features affordable rental properties that cash flow. Our boots on the ground turnkey provider, Greg Bond, wrote a special report to help you discover the amazing market of Orlando. Request your free copy today. Visit GetRichEducation.com/Orlando. That's GetRichEducation.com/Orlando.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.